Okay, so last week I did a video on systems thinking. Well, it was my lecture that I did over at, or talk that I did over at the Las Vegas UX UI meetup. Now, in the QA session, Crystal, one of our meetup members, asked me a question in regards to how you can convince businesses of the importance and the value of user experience. And this wasn't a question that I really clarified. I just shot from the hip with a response saying that you just got to talk the language of business. And that's that's honestly a summation of what I've learned, but that's not the most informative response. Now, I don't feel like Crystal was satisfied with my answer because, she did say, I mean, that's it. That's all you need to know is just the language of business. And thinking on it more, I realized that there is actually something larger to unpack. And I have to give some background as to why this question needs to be unpacked a bit more. At least my response needs to be unpacked more. And one of the things is that there is a bias. There's a reason why I just summed it up so easily. It's mostly because I had the fortunate or the privilege of working with a lot of people who already understood the value of user experience, so that when I went in there, I just had to do what I needed to do. Or, I mean, things just pretty much felt fairly automatic. I just asked my questions, did some of my process, my research, and that's really all I needed to do. There wasn't a lot of convincing that needed to happen. There were some points in my work over the last number of years in user experience where I had to convince people, but it was more so the approach, the methodology, and the authorization of certain software that I needed to use in order to get the results that I needed. Now, there's something very specific about the Las Vegas user experience and design market versus other locations. The user experience market in Las Vegas is very minimal, and at best, it's still growing. There's a lot of businesses coming in. Amazon, Google, a lot of the big tech companies are converging in Las Vegas, especially since Las Vegas is one of the key tech or the server hubs in the nation. And there's a lot of great real estate for businesses to set up and hire more people. I mean, there's more people migrating to Las Vegas than many other cities in the U.S. right now. And with that said, user experience is still growing. It's so raw that there's relatively no jobs. Now, because of that, this is a very important question, the entire how do you convince businesses of the importance of UX? Because one of the things that my co-coordinators or co-organizers are trying to do is to grow the education of user experience and the importance of it in the Las Vegas city overall, and help facilitate the growth of job opportunities. Now, to go back to this question, you have to, I'll put up some slides to help reinforce this, but I've split up the, the explanation into multiple categories, almost like a Fibonacci sequence, or not a Fibonacci sequence, a golden spiral or golden ratio. Now, we have to first start off with two sections. One is the design industry, and the other is the systems approach. To answer the question of how do you convince people of the importance and the value of UX, especially in the realm of business, let's say we go through the design industry. We have to look at this from a sales perspective. If I were to convince a business of the value of user experience, within the framework of sales, there is warm and there are cold sales. Warm sales are when people already know what you're about and they're coming to you to help them. And so it's easy to do UX from that perspective. And a lot of my work, a lot of my business has been done in that funnel. Now, let's say there's a lot of people that are not aware of user experience. And I believe this is where Crystal was asking me this question. It's like, how do you convince them? So now we're looking at cold sales. or the cold approach. And so there, for me, from my experience, there are two ways to approach this. Either you do independent research and you just try to sell them as much as you can on the return of investment through user experience. The other side to that is you kind of sample your approach to things by having them collaborate with the work, and you kind of just kind of show them a hint, a taste of the metrics and the successes that you can, provide them if you did the full process. Like doing the entire ideation and the research initially, creating that incentive for them was always a great way to hook them. But ultimately, if those methods don't work, whether it's the independent research in order to sell them on the return on investment or the collaborative kind of sampling approach, if that doesn't work, ultimately, I mean, I just defer to even what Chris Do of The Future mentions, where you really don't want to waste your time. Your time is valuable. If you can't convince them through just pitching to them or even collaborating with them, if they're just so cynical, they really are not your target customer, because you don't want it to be such an uphill climb. Another way to reference this is that you don't want to waste your time on people that need to be convinced. Simon Sinek, he talks about the law of diffusion of innovation, and this is something that I really like to pattern on various different scenarios. But in this regard, in terms of convincing people of what the value of UX, you don't want to overextend yourself, because at some point you're going to be wasting your time and spending way too much energy. You're spending more energy than the return on investment. So you have to weigh it. If it takes too long to convince these people of the value of your work and your process, you need to let them go. Because one of the things that we learn, especially through psychological and behavioral analysis, is that more often than not, people would rather find their own beliefs justified than the actual truth of the matter, which means that in the end, they have to face the hard truths, tough love. They have to experience their trials, their errors, before they realize, maybe I should actually have someone do some user experience, or maybe I should look into it. A lot of the people that ended up working with me experienced those problems, those trials, those difficulties, and that's why they became from cold sales to warm sales, because they've experienced either errors or they've had someone experience those errors to where they don't want to experience any more of these issues. But it's tough. It's tough to be patient. It's tough to just kind of let go of potential clients and let them experience some of the hardships, because either their ego or some other factor is getting in the way of them fully accepting the power of user experience design. Now, that's the entire design industry approach that's typical to the design industry, where you have to do kind of a cold sales or warm sales approach. But if I were to take the systems approach to things, there are several factors that I would look at, and this will augment the kind of strategy that I would use on this kind of business person that I'm trying to convince. This is a bit unorthodox. This is not something I recommend everyone doing, especially if you are, well, basically it just takes a bit of finesse to really negotiate this way. But these are a number of factors that I would take in the systems approach in order to kind of negotiate with the other person. Because at this point, we're dealing with psychology, and for the most part, you're trying to convince them, manipulate their stance so that you would get them to your side. But these are some factors that I look at. First, I look at the business person's market, what they're targeting, their finances, where they are with it, their current knowledge base of not just UX, but their product and many other things, their background, where they stood, what they came from, because a lot of their background, their relationships, etc., will inform where they stand now. Their personal values, their principles, whether they know them or not, will determine how solid their discussions with you become. And lastly, anything that they're dependent on and anything that's dependent on them. Those interrelationships or those interdependencies that they have will augment further negotiations with them if you're trying to convince them of you being their client or whichever. And that's the systems approach things. It takes a lot of digging. You're doing some type of therapy approach. But that takes a lot of finesse because you could end up screwing it up. But that's an approach that I do if I really want to explore and understand whether or not this client is really seeking my services or if they're even ready to do some user experience work. But hopefully that kind of captures a lot of the information that is in response to the question of business. How do I convince people of the value of UX? Crystal, if you watch this, hopefully you've gained something out of this, whether it reaffirms something or there's more information that needs to be explored. Let me know. Everyone else that's watching this, hopefully it's as informative to you from both a design perspective or just curious of how I think about things or what I've experienced. And I will catch you guys next time. So take care. Any other information, questions, comments, let me know. Like, share, and subscribe. I will catch you guys later.